And we are good to go.
Hey, welcome everyone. We're starting the Prospect Parks and Recreation Advisory Board regular meeting, January 19th, 2022. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the November 8th meeting minutes, which were sent out in advance. Are there any changes or additions that need to be made? Is there a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Mayor Evans, do you have anything that you would like to update us on?
It seems like more and more people who I know well are getting COVID. Uh, the only good news about it is that none of them are really, really sick. Seems to be like a really bad cold that lasts for several days, that kind of thing. But it is extremely contagious, as you know, and it's affecting a lot of people who I know. We're having a initial meeting tomorrow, start putting together an amendment to the budget for a variety of reasons. Probably chief among them is that we recently, and I think I mentioned this last council meeting, that we recently received new guidance from the Treasury Department of the United States, basically giving us a green light to spend our ARPA money, which is very substantial, on pretty much anything we want. There's a category that used to have still does if you choose to use it, a very complicated formula for calculating your so-called lost income, lost revenue. And what they've done now is they've just established a conclusive presumption that everybody has lost at least $10 million. So if your allocation is less than $10 million, you can just plug it in to your revenue and your budget, and you're off to the races. There are one or two limitations, and one that catches my eye we got to be careful about. You're not allowed to use the money to put it in a rainy day fund, which means to me that if we were to put, say, so far we have received $630,000, we'll get another 630 net.
I think the mayor is frozen.
I don't know what Ron did to him. Yes.
Love technology when it works.
It has its limitations.
Well, I would ask Steve to start the presentation, but I want the mayor and Ron to be able to listen to it. I could give a couple of updates on the parks while we're waiting. Oh, something's happening here. That the mayor and Ron already know about. One of the things that recently happened, and I learned this at the Forestation Board meeting, is that a large tree on the edge of Putney Pond came down in one of the storms and fell across a neighbor's swimming pool. And the mayor has authorized the city to help with the removal of that tree, since it was a park tree that came down on private property. And I understand that either that's in process or at least it's been looked at and they're figuring out exactly what they need to do. Another thing I can talk about maybe is the fact that this June 2nd, will be the 10th anniversary of the official opening of Putney Pond, not Putney Pond, Harrods Creek Park. And those of you that were around when we opened it, Todd Eberly was mayor at that time. And we had a formal ribbon cutting and invited the press and lots of other people there. Steve was probably there. And it was a really nice event. So today I'm asking you to think about, what do we do on June 2nd this year? Because I think we should have some kind of a special celebration remembering, remembering the opening 10 years ago and thinking about the amazing things that have happened in the parks since we did that. So I'm not asking for any decisions, but I'm asking you to start thinking about what kind of celebration could we do.
Well, Linda, I think the elephant in the room, of course, is COVID.
Yes, of course.
I mean,
But
it's just hard
outdoor-
to plan. It's hard to plan
Outdoors
ahead.
in the park.
Like if this were today, if June 2nd were today, I wouldn't be comfortable even having an outside
Right.
gathering.
Right.
So, I think we can be thinking of some ideas, but it's really contingent on what happens with the virus, I think.
Like everything else in life.
Right.
Mayor, I see that you are back. Would you like to continue your report?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Somebody didn't like what I was saying because everything went black. Ron came in and fixed it. The one thing you're not allowed to do with the money is you're not allowed to put it into a rainy day fund. In other words, put it aside and not spend it. I suppose the reason for that is that the purpose of this is that you want the cities to spend this money, crank up the economy and so forth. In order not to put it in a rainy day fund, it seems to me that you have to be careful that what you put in the revenue part of the budget has place to go, place for you to spend it. Really, that's what we're going to be looking at tomorrow and in the near future. Where do we need or want to spend this money that the government wants us to spend? So in that connection, other than the things Ron and I have already talked about, like he says there are a couple of bridges on the Blue Trail that need to be redone, things like that. Send in your dream sheets, your wish list. Let us know what it is as far as the parks are concerned that you want to do. Now, before I leave that topic, one of the things that you're all aware of that we're doing is we are developing Little Hunting Creek Park. So far, all you really can see visibly is put some stakes in the ground to mark various things, but behind the scenes, there's been a lot going on. We've hired an architect. I've just hired an electrical contractor. The two big things that are going to be in the park when it's done this year, this coming calendar year, playground, which was the initial impetus for the thing, pavilion. Along those lines, we've already got an architect and he's already designed it, getting costs together for that. So that's really all I wanted to tell everybody, and I'll be happy to answer questions about it, but that's where we're headed. The one thing we want to be sure to do, two things. We want to be sure when we put these funds into our budget, we have a place for them to go so that at the end of the fiscal year, they're not hanging around and going into our bank account, and therefore it looks like a rainy day fund. You're not allowed to put it in a rainy day fund, not submitted.
Mayor, what's the time frame for which you have to spend those funds?
I think the year is 2024. But why wait?
Questions?
I mean, for instance, one of the things that I've heard, and I don't know about anybody else, I've heard people complain about the overall appearance of City Hall, that having these 3 different colored bricks and stuff like that. Ron and I talked about it. Ron tells me, oh, painting the brick would be a horrible idea, maintenance-wise and all this stuff. But one thing we agree about is that we could replace the shutters that are different colors. And according to Ron, they could use being replaced anyway. So I said, well, how many shutters are there? And he's sitting there counting off how many shutters he thinks there are. It comes out to something like 36 shutters. We need to find out what it would cost to replace 36 shutters. That kind of thing.
Great.
This whole thing was Sarah's fault because she came up with the idea of having a playground, which generated all kinds of interesting dialogue. Right, Sarah? And Holmes was right behind her. David doesn't get off lightly either. He takes responsibility for this.
I'll stand behind Sarah anytime.
Yeah, I'm done and I'm
Okay.
having too good a time. I'll just stop.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know him, I would like to introduce Steve Emley, who's a principal with OHM Advisors. Steve was with MSD when the force main sewer line was built through Harrods Creek Park, and I believe you were the lead engineer on that project as well. And so we worked very closely, especially Stuart Miles worked very closely with Steve because Stuart negotiated the easement through Harrods Creek Park. And that work between Stuart and Steve resulted in us having the parking lot, the donation of the land that the former sewer plant was on, and also the construction of the Orange Trail. So Steve is very knowledgeable about Harrods Creek Park and has been involved in a lot of the development. So when we got the idea of replacing the culvert with a bridge, Steve was the person I most wanted to work on this project, just because he already has so much background information. So with that, Steve, I'll turn this over to you. I did send out a PDF of the draft report for everyone, and I think Steve is going to make some comments about the report, and then we'll have a discussion. So take it away, Steve.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. I guess first I do want to thank the committee and the city for allowing us to continue to work on this issue. I was looking back through some old records the other day, and I think it was 2011 when we first engaged the city about the purchase of those easements. So I feel like it's an old friend to me in a lot of ways. So I'm thankful to be able to continue to work on. So thank you all. I do want to point out there's a draft watermark on this report for a couple of reasons. One, there was some revised pricing that we were still waiting on from a couple of the vendors that didn't come in when we submitted this to the city. So we do have some of that in hand now. Nothing changed substantially in terms of the overall scope and size, but just some revised pricing we were waiting on. And also, obviously, we wanted to get some comments from the committee and the city before we took that draft off to make sure that we covered all the territory that you all were interested in covering. So if there's additional content or options that we need to consider, we'll certainly back up and include those in the final version. I don't want to spend a lot of time going through the report blow by blow you've got in front of you, and you can read it for yourselves. I do want to hit the highlights just so we understand what the scope of the work was and maybe what some of the key decisions moving forward are. Our scope was initially to evaluate some options for prefabricated bridges, so bridges that would come to the site assembled or mostly assembled, and would require a minimal amount of activity on the site. We ended up deviating from that just a little bit, just to be a little bit more inclusive on some options and try to just make sure we have those conversations before we make a decision going forward or before the city does. That work involved the use of a geotechnical consultant to bring in and evaluate the soil conditions on site, which is really a critical piece of information that we need for any scenario that we move forward with in terms of a bridge type. The contractor and the designer will need that soils information to design the abutments for whichever bridge we construct. So of course that report is included in the appendices of the report. It's pretty boring stuff, so I won't talk about it any more than that, but if you've got questions, I'll be glad to answer it. We did also spend a little time with the city and with some others talking about the design constraints of the bridge. How long does it need to be? How wide does it need to be? What kind of a weight rating it needs to carry? And also had some discussions with MSD during that time, just because of of all the assets they have across the bridge in the main part of the park that they may need access in the future. So we settled on a bridge capacity of 10,000 pounds, which is called an H5 loading. And you'll see that in some of the quotes from vendors. Basically something that would accommodate a full-size pickup truck. And I think Ron and others provide that input from the city's perspective. So that's basically what most of this pricing is based on. And really from there, we went on a mission to try to summarize some options in terms of bridge suppliers and vendors who provide this service. And I'm going to share a screen that is really I'm going to share a screen. WebEx is not the platform I use every day, so let's see if I can do this without muddling it up too bad. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a summary at the tail end of the report that really summarizes the options that we considered. And I wanted to just spend a second buzzing through these. There's some photos of most of these options that are also in the content of the body of the report that we can look at as well if there's an interest in doing that. But essentially, there's a few different types of fundamental decisions that are to be made. And before I go into these, I guess this is a perception of mine more than anything else, so it may just be opinion, but obviously budget is a driver in this decision, but I really think that there's an opportunity here to develop this bridge replacement as kind of a gateway into the main portion of Harris Creek Park. So there's some opportunities to make it a really important feature of that. So cost aside, I think really the primary decision to be made from my perspective is there a certain look or feel that the city and the committee is interested in making sure that we hit when we make a decision on this replacement. Costs are all over the board. You can spend as little or as much as you want to on something like this. We've been working on a bridge down in Loretto, Kentucky from Maker's Mark that I may have shown Linda a picture of. but it's actually a dry stack stone bridge that is very, very expensive, but it's also very, very unique. And it's kind of a centerpiece of what they're trying to develop there. So those are some of the things I think we need to consider pretty carefully. So the most standard prefabricated bridge types are going to be steel, which is a very popular choice for this type of a crossing. It's very strong. It's a relatively lightweight material, and you have a lot of flexibility in terms of the design of the bridge itself. There's several different types of trusses that can be built with that, either under or over the deck of the bridge. And again, there's some pictures of these included in the body of the report. I'll tell you what, I want to walk through these just so we can have some stop sharing. Can everybody see these now? I'm sorry. Again, just some examples of steel bridges. The pricing of steel is probably middle of the road in terms of the overall cost options that are out there. We had one of our landscape architects in our office do some renderings for some of these scenarios. So if that's helpful in the future for another type of bridge, we have the ability to do that. We did this all just based on LiDAR and contour information that was available. None of this is drone based, but I think it helps paint a picture of in terms of just the visual impacts of what decision been made with this bridge. Again, a slight variation on the steel concept is aluminum. It's a lighter but more expensive product, but it's really available in the same format and truss types that would be available in the steel bridge. Something that the steel and aluminum have in common is that the pricing that's given by these manufacturers does not include abutment design and some of those other design features that would be required prior to the delivery of those bridges. So there'll be some work to do before those bridges arrive on site. Timber bridges is something that's very popular, and I don't know what interest there is in that. Is certainly something I wanted to have a conversation about. The key difference between some of the timber bridge manufacturers and the steel and aluminum bridge manufacturers is that a lot of the timber bridges are really a turnkey package, meaning that when you order the bridge, they deliver the bridge, the components of the bridge, they install the bridge, and they really leave you with the finished product where there's really no additional engineering or construction work that you would have to do on your own. So outside of that, timber bridges may or may not be something that the city wants to consider, but certainly something we need to have a talk about, I think.
With timber bridges, my biggest concern is how does the timber hold up with being flooded? I mean, because we're almost guaranteed at least once a year this bridge is going to be underwater.
Yeah, this is in the FEMA floodplain, so Ron knows it better than anyone. This will go underwater. Once a year is probably a pretty good estimate in terms of what we've seen in the last 10 years. But you're right, the timber bridges are all also timber pilings. So even the foundations and supports for those timber bridges is a timber material. So certainly the lifespan of a structure like that would be lesser than something of a different material, concrete or steel or aluminum. Any other questions or comments about what we've?
Is there any kind of ongoing maintenance required with the timber bridge? Or is it just that the lifespan would be reduced and might need to be replaced at some point?
I would view a timber bridge a lot like it would a deck. I mean, it does require some routine maintenance, cleaning, probably restaining, or restaining the bridge, staining or sealing, whichever the preference is. But it certainly has a higher level of maintenance, I think, than either the steel or the aluminum option would have.
That makes it less appealing to me if there's ongoing maintenance, and I suspect to Ron as well.
Yeah, we we almost didn't even include a discussion about some of these materials just because we knew there would be some hesitancy. But again, we wanted to at least do a complete evaluation of what the options were.
Steve, what's the longevity of each of the different styles that you talked about, steel and aluminum and concrete?
Well, I mean, steel and aluminum, I would expect to have a lifespan of 50 plus years. So I think it'll outlive most of us on the call here. And concrete would probably have a slightly longer lifespan. Um, aluminum honestly almost has an indefinite lifespan and requires almost no maintenance. So depending on what type of a finish you have on your steel, you may have a slightly longer or shorter lifespan. But again, those are all 50 plus year service lives.
Linda, can guests ask questions?
Sure.
Steve, if the city wanted at some point in the future to put a hard surface on the Orange Trail, would the weight rating of this allow for some way to get concrete across that bridge to do that?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that earlier, Stuart. All of these bridges, with the exception of the timber bridges, are really made. All of the steel and aluminum vendors that we talk to, they're really designed to have a concrete deck on them. With the exception of the timber and the reinforced fiberglass polymer we haven't discussed yet. I think all the options are designed to have a concrete deck, although you could choose to put a wooden deck on, but they're really intended to have a concrete deck.
And my question was a little different. I apologize, I didn't ask it correctly. What I'm thinking of is if they wanted to concrete part of the Orange Trail and they needed to get concrete across that bridge, would that be a possibility?
Oh, I'm sorry. Not in the current loading that we have it designed for, no.
Okay.
Yeah,
How much weight would that take? 20,000, 30,000?
yeah, a fully loaded concrete truck is probably an H20 loading, so it's probably 25,000 pounds or more. Substantially heavier load than what we're talking about here. Now, of course, they do have smaller machines that can take concrete across the bridge and really distribute that load a little better, maybe. But yeah, we have this entire venture was based on that 10,000 pound rating.
And I guess you could also have a vehicle on the other side and pump the concrete across the creek.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I can answer before we move on. Again, one of the components or the materials we almost didn't cover at all was a fiberglass polymer product. The technology related to this material has changed quite a bit in the last 10 years. So we went ahead and asked the question to a couple of vendors. These are largely used for purely pedestrian crossings, so they're a little more limited in terms of weight. As a matter of fact, while all the other bridges in this report are priced at 12 feet wide, this material was not offered in the 12-foot width, but the 10-foot width was the widest that they could go. So we went ahead and priced it at that. But it is also rated for the 10,000 pounds. And you know, again, the only advantage of this material is it's you know, this fiberglass polymer is very strong. It's very light, even lighter than aluminum, and it has proven to be pretty durable in some of the other materials that is used in. It's used a lot in pipelines these days. I have not used it myself in any crossing like this, but it is an option we can talk about more if you'd like to. When we move on to the precast options, there's a couple different formats that these types of structures could come in. I think the fundamental drawback, and again, this is perception on my part, is that they tend to have more of a highway feel to them than they do a parks feel. And they also tend to be quite a bit more expensive than some of the other options that we're talking about. And so we do include some pricing and some just some pictures of what those types of structures look like. And we can talk more about that as we get toward the discussions here in a minute. I remember when Linda and and Ron, I think, first walked out there, I think Linda actually mentioned the use of an old railroad car. And of course, that's something that we've all probably seen in different places. So we were having a discussion in the office about what some of those other non-traditional options might be. These really don't apply. They're not really prefabricated options. They're just either used or something that is a little bit unique that we could talk about. And I think there's a lot of options even beyond what we've covered here, but maybe it'll get some thoughts going. So there is quite a wide market for used bridges, and while there's some drawbacks to them, I do think there's at least some possibility that if we were patient with that inventory, that you might land something that happens to fit really well in terms of both size and aesthetics in that. And obviously there's at least some potentially fairly large cost savings there, depending on where that bridge might be located and what the shipping might cost. And then we did also talk about the flat railroad car. Couple of beauties of this is that obviously it's very strong. They're relatively cheap compared to some of the other prefabricated functions. And you can really dress up the railings and the finish of these to suit whatever look the city might be looking for. So we didn't spend a lot of time with renderings about what those options might look like in terms of rails and deck finish. These could obviously accommodate a concrete deck as well. But there was a local vendor that we found in central part of Indiana that was probably the cheapest in terms of shipping to our area. And then I guess the last thing that I wanted to at least talk about, I mean, I think that I think the idea of replacing these comes from an aesthetics perspective more than a functional standpoint. But it's worth mentioning anyway that the existing culverts that are in there are a very, very strong product. They're a reinforced concrete, class 3 reinforced concrete pipe. And there are ways that we could consider dressing those up. Obviously, it's fine to put a concrete deck directly over those. They're probably the only material, Stuart, that could probably handle the concrete truck that you asked about earlier. So we included those as an option just for discussion. I do think there's at least some possibilities of being able to dress those up and leave them in places. That was something the city wanted to consider.
I think the only drawback to going that route is that one of the things we hoped to accomplish with removing the culvert was to return the stream to its normal state. So if we did dress up the existing culverts, we would not achieve that goal. But as you say, it would be quite a bit less money. So maybe something that should be discussed. One of the reasons we talked about for removing the culvert and returning the stream flow is that the theory is that we would get less silting of the stream by the canoe launch. So, and that is an issue when the water's low. It's sometimes a little difficult to launch canoes or kayaks. So, and I don't know if you've got anything to add about that, Steve, if you've got any thoughts.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. There is a pretty substantial amount of sedimentation that's built up on the upstream end of those culverts. And the idea of restoring the stream bed to its original condition is a great approach and one that I would support. Again, we mentioned the option just to make sure it's something that's on the record.
So any other questions or discussion for Steve on what's been presented so far?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask on the steel option there, it looks from the photos as though those have been painted. Is that paint on them, or um, or is that the natural color?
So there's two different finishes that are available on the steel. There's actually three. Um, I'm looking at my screen and acting like y'all can see it. So this rendering that I think you can see right now is actually what's called a weathered steel. So it is intentionally designed to, once it gets exposed to some moisture, to get a weathered, rusty almost surface to it. So that requires no future maintenance at all. And it really does have a nice look, I think, in a park setting.
Would that be the type of finish on the Big Four bridge? The pedestrian?
Yes.
bridge? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you see it
Another
used a lot.
another
in-
advantage to the natural too is with vandalism, sand it off. A month or so later, it rusts back up, and it's like it never happened. So, whereas if you have a painted surface, you have to sand it down and repaint it or paint over it. So, just something to think about.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
also on I-64, going from here to downtown. There's a bridge that I think is a natural uh, rust effect like that. Is that the same type of thing?
It is, and sometimes it's intentional, and sometimes it's because they haven't been maintained. But the end result is the same: as you get that weathered, almost rusty finish to them that has that nice patina to it. The other two options are painted option, which I don't think would be a good choice. And this is that picture that you're seeing in front of you now, the black painted structure. And I didn't include a version of it in here just because it's kind of ugly. This is actually an aluminum bridge, but they make a galvanized steel as well that is almost kind of like a dull silver finish, which weathers pretty well in terms of maintenance, but I don't think looks as nice in this type of a setting. And I don't think the pricing varies much on any of those options. So I think it's really just a preference on maintenance and aesthetics.
So the weathered option, doesn't that takes a while for that patina to develop, doesn't it? Over a period of some years?
It does not. I mean, essentially, what they're bringing is a bare steel material there that develops that surface pretty quickly.
Okay.
So I think within a month or a little more, you'd probably already have some version of that finish, although it probably does exaggerate over time. Linda, do we want to spend any time kind of going over cost options today?
Yeah, I think it'd be worth discussing. And I think on your summary page, you sort of have that
Yeah, let me
out pretty well.
pull that back up here. That's not the screen you want to see. Okay, can you see that now?
Yeah.
So of course, across the top here are the different options in terms of materials or configurations of the bridge. And then we try to break down on the left-hand column just the components of each one of those bridges, including the installation of the bridge. And of course, the totals are down here at the bottom. So, we're as low as something around $20,000 to up over $150,000 for these options, depending on the material and the type of bridge that we're looking at. And again, with the timber, there's a couple of costs that just be aware are estimates. They're not provided by the manufacturers. We've taken a stab at the installation of the concrete bridge abutments, the excavation and pouring of those abutments. Also the installation. Obviously, most of these bridges would require a crane to set. So you've got some fairly large equipment that would need to get down in there. We do think we could accommodate that equipment on the access road. But that installation includes all the labor and equipment to actually set the bridges on the abutments. Some of these bridges have actually, I guess the only ones that would have what they call a formal head wall or wing wall are the timber bridges, concrete bridges. The rest are clear spans that don't really have any head walls or wing walls. And then all of the decking costs are assumed to be a concrete deck.
Linda, are we hoping to begin installation of this bridge during this fiscal year?
We do not have budget in this fiscal year unless this is one of the projects that would be identified as something to use some of the ARPA funds for. There still needs to be, and maybe Steve, you could mention this, once we sort of hone in on the direction we want to go, I think there's still some additional work that your firm would need to do just to finalize. Am I right about that?
There would be a little bit of work to do in terms of finalizing maybe a recommendation, but depending on which bridge type, for instance, we mentioned the timber bridge installation, which I don't think is an option anymore, but that really is a turnkey installation. So you would provide the geotechnical report to that bridge vendor, and there really wouldn't be much of a need from us with the exception of permitting to achieve that installation. So really if you need someone to design the abutments, to manage the permitting, it's going to be specific to the bridge that we choose. And of course, one thing we haven't really covered at all is, you can forget all of the bridges that are in this report and just choose to do something completely unique that maybe we haven't talked about, and I'd like to if there are other thoughts.
Does anyone have comments you'd like to make about specific options in this report or your
I
thoughts?
didn't like the idea of seeing if we could find a used one. But of course we need to see what it looks like, but I like that you came up with, Linda.
I'm sorry,
I think it looks like a used rail bridge.
that was an idea that someone else from Metro Parks had mentioned to me at one time. I think the trick there is finding one and finding, that's going to fit into your time frame of when we want to accomplish this task. And also, as Steve indicated, the shipping really depends on where it's coming from and how far it needs to be transported.
Well, and I think it's important to distinguish between the flat rail car and the used truss bridge, for instance. The flat rail cars are readily available, and we know that they're relatively close. The used truss bridges that might be taken out of service by another municipality somewhere is the one that really is kind of a wild card in terms of availability and location.
Linda?
Steve, could you?
It seems to me that this committee should put their heads together and decide what kind of bridge they want. And once they've done that, then what we would need is to know all the costs, not just for the bridge itself, but for the approaches and what engineering or technical help we need. We need a total cost for the thing.
Right.
And finally, it seems to me that, I mean, we've got 5 months left in this fiscal year. And come, say, May, we're going to be putting together the budget for the next fiscal year, starting July 1st.
And one of the things we need to do before any construction could happen would be to get the permitting. I think, Steve, you think that's going to be a relatively easy thing to do, but I don't know what time frame that would take. So I'm sort of thinking, and I think this is what the mayor is suggesting, is we're probably talking about fiscal year 2023. And we should be looking at finding a full budget request for that fiscal year.
Yeah, there's a permit.
That's where I was going with that, but you're right.
I kind of glazed over the permitting portion of that, but there is a small section of the report dedicated to permitting. It's very short because I think the process in this case is pretty simple. We expect them to all be local general permits that probably have no more than a 60-day window on getting them.
Any other questions for Steve?
If I were deciding this, and I'm not necessarily the one doing it, but I would ask to put it in the budget for next fiscal year rather than the current fiscal year.
And that gives us a little more
The
time
money
to
will
really
still be there.
come up with our full recommendation that we can all support. And I don't know if we want to have a separate meeting to just discuss these options among the committee and move forward with a formal budget request, or if people want to extend this meeting today to discuss our thoughts. I don't know if you feel like we need to think through what we've learned today and what we've learned reading the report. I'm open to your suggestions.
Linda, I like the idea of having a separate meeting where we just focus on that, because I think the discussion may lead us in different ways, whereas if we rush it here, we haven't thought it out as well as we would like to have.
I think I like that idea. If we want to include this in a budget request for fiscal year 2023, Mayor, what is our time frame in needing to submit something to you, or whatever the budget committee is made up of?
Well, I like to put together a requested budget, certainly in May, mid-May, certainly not later than late May. Give the council, it's best done in early May, because that gives the council two regular council meetings, take it up, May and June.
So
I would say by early May, your request for what you need to accomplish this, among your other requests, early May would be what I would like.
well, that's certainly doable. And why don't after this meeting, I would like for us, the committee, to make a decision of the direction we want to go in sooner rather than later, while the information is still fresh in our minds. So I will try to probably propose another special meeting to discuss this in the next week or two. Does that sound agreeable?
It might be helpful if this committee could, say today, ask Steve to furnish them with copies of what we were looking at a little bit ago on those alternatives that they're considering.
I think
Having listened
everyone
to the
has,
discussion, it sounds like you're probably not going to be considering a wooden bridge. I don't know. Sounds like you might be considering a used railroad flat car, or you might be considering an aluminum bridge. But whatever it is, maybe Steve could supply the committee with one or more copies, hard copies of those different alternatives.
we,
I think everyone has a digital copy, but we'd be happy to provide as many hard copies as you'd like.
do committee members feel that they would benefit from a hard copy? I know I printed out about 10 pages of the portions of the report that I thought were usable for me, leaving out all the technical stuff because I don't understand that anyway.
If
Okay.
anybody wants one, just get a hold of me. I can print it out here at the office. There's no sense in Steve having to print a bunch of them out.
Okay.
I'd like a hard copy.
You got it.
Okay, if anyone else wants one, just ask Ron. Have it for you. You can pick it up at City Hall. Any other questions for Steve before we? Of course, you're willing or you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you probably have other things you want to do.
I might very well sit in if you don't mind.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. I guess we can move along. The next part of the agenda, parks update. Last month, Jacqueline McGrail gave us a lot of information on some new invasive plant species of concern. And subsequent to our meeting, I also had a phone conversation, I don't know if it was phone or email, with Carolyn, who brought up another concern that I don't think Jacqueline mentioned. Jacqueline mentioned the Japanese chaff flower and the fountain grass and the Japanese small carpet grass all in Harrods Creek Park, and also the buttercup figwort or lesser celandine, I guess is how you say it, in Little Honey Creek Park and Putney Pond along this stream. Carolyn mentioned that we're getting a fair amount of native cane coming up along the Blue Trail of Harrods Creek Park. And while that is a native plant, the concern is that it's a little aggressive and it may crowd out our wildflowers. And the wildflowers, of course, are at their greatest numbers along the Blue Trails. So I did send an email to our ICF contact, Kateri Tanyan, and she said that she would like to research a little bit about the chaff flower and the other ones along Harrods Creek Park, and that she also agreed that there's quite a number of the buttercup figwort plants right along the stream, which is a sensitive area. And she's going to do some thinking about the best way to address that. She didn't really say anything to me right now about the native cane. I know when we first started making the trail, the Orange Trail, before the sewer project, some of us were involved in digging up that cane, to cutting and digging up things to make a path, and it's pretty hardy and it's pretty difficult to deal with. So I will be interested in her comments getting back to me, and that will again be something that will be part of our probably 2023 budget request, because I think most of the work at this point, I guess the figwort would probably be addressed in the early spring. So that could be this fiscal year if we have budget left over remaining to address that. The rest of it would probably be fiscal year 2023. So I'm awaiting some feedback from her, and then we'll try to make a plan. Of course, those of you who have been helpful in removing garlic mustard, that season will be upon us again. And we will use volunteers again to pull up garlic mustard. So, Carolyn, did you want to say anything more about invasives?
No, I think you covered it, and you know, it will be good to have some feedback from your contact there at ICF, or you know,
Yes.
to see what her recommendations would be regarding all of those invasives. So,
And, you know, in terms of coming up with a budget request and as the mayor mentioned, kind of coming up with our wish list of things we want to do in the parks, I am still a firm believer in the fact that anything we can do to continue removing invasive plants will be helpful down the road, because if we stop doing invasive removals now, what's remaining will just come back and reconquer some of the areas that have been cleared. So that's just something to think about. I also want to say that we received a donation of monoscopes, and I'll read the letter that came with this. It said, "Dear Ms. Wardell, my husband and I would like to donate these monoscopes to the Parks and Recreation Department. We hope they might be helpful for birding or wildflower hikes. We really appreciate everything your committee does to keep our community so beautiful." And it's signed Elizabeth Paget. And I don't think I've met her before, but that was very kind. And I'll do a little show and tell here. They donated 3. I haven't exactly figured out what all the parts are of these, but I don't know if you could see it. It's just a little monoscope, handheld, and there are 3 of them. There's a way to affix, get it out. They come with a little tripod, so I guess you could put it on a fence or a log or stone, and you can connect this to the bottom, and you can adjust the angle. The thing I am not sure what to do with is, I guess we could make them available to be checked out. I don't know how that would happen, if they could be checked out like a library book is. She mentioned that if the city didn't think we could use them, maybe they could go to Boy Scouts, but I'm not sure what the Scouts would do with them either. So I welcome any thoughts or comments about it. As I said, there are 3. They come with a nice little carrying case. So does
Could
anyone?
do like a little experiment as it comes towards the wildflower walks this spring, and whoever shepherds that, take them and just see how people use them and see the functionality of you know, and then maybe it'll spur a better idea of check them out from the library, check them out front desk at City Hall, or
Right.
waterproof box in the park. That seems like maybe that wouldn't work, but
I think
I
they
think
just,
they'd last about a week and then they wouldn't come back.
yeah.
They look for like pretty nice ones.
they do. And unfortunately, the instructions, of course, are in Chinese and English, and whoever wrote the English instructions, they did not get a native speaker to translate. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of research on using, and maybe just take them out when I'm out in the park. And I've got 3 of them. So if any committee member wants to try it out, I could leave them at the front desk at City Hall with your name on it. Take it and try it out, play with it. So, but I thought that was a lovely idea that someone wanted to thank us and provide something that would be helpful. So, any other comments on that? And we've already talked a little bit about the Harrods Creek 10th anniversary coming up in June. And Carolyn's absolutely right. We don't know now what we're going to be able to do next month, let alone 5 months from now. So, but if anyone has any ideas about something they think would be a nice way to commemorate it, speak up. Well, we
I
can,
know at one time we had talked about doing the band, the concert series, but obviously all that got scrapped. But I don't know if we could do, I don't know exactly what we're thinking about it. If we're going to have it down in Harrods Creek Park, if we have one of the, a band like we do at 4th of July and celebrate that way. But obviously it's all contingent on what's going on.
we could at least, at the very least, we can have a spread in a newsletter, with pictures and of different things, that improvements in Harrods Creek Park and so forth. So that would be
Ironically, I found a day I was going through a bunch of pictures for a calendar and found some of the construction work from down there. When they were actually putting the pipeline in and stuff. So we've got pictures. God knows we got pictures.
Well, I think that can be the bare minimum, is we'll come up with some narrative and pictures for the newsletter, and then see what we can do as time gets a little closer and we have a better idea. Lynn, do you have any update on Scouts?
Couple of things. First of all, we're not meeting right now because of COVID concerns, and we're hoping to start meeting again late February or by March the 1st. I do have a young man right now that may be interested in doing the replacement bridge we got to replace. So I'm gonna try to get him and his parents down there to take a look at it, and hopefully I'll have more information for you at our next meeting.
And that's the bridge in Putney Pond, is that correct?
Correct.
The very first bridge that was built in Putney Pond by a Scout.
About 10 years ago.
Yeah, at least 10 years ago. We didn't have our standards in place. And I think they used just pressure treated wood instead of cedar. And the years have taken its toll. And I think Ron and his guys did some repair work on it,
We
but
did shore it up, but
Yeah.
it needs to be
it's a
replaced.
Band-Aid.
Yeah. Our ladder structures are all much heavier than that bridge was, but see what we can do.
I'm thinking that on the replacement, as long as we raise it, it'll help it last a little longer too. It was a little low, and a lot of stuff would get stuck up under there and just wick moisture up. So if we put it on a block or something and make it a step
Yeah.
up.
We can do that.
That sounds good. Ron, do you have any other parks updates or comments?
No, not right now. We're working on plumbing and stuff for Little Hunting Creek Park and trying to get cost estimates and all kinds of fun stuff. But other than that, it's all been pretty quiet. So, the two bridges that the mayor mentioned, the first and the third bridge on the Blue Trail are the ones I'm talking about, but just replacing with the nice cedar ones.
Oh, good.
After Jack put the newest one in, they look so good. And they'll be there for years and years and years. They'll be there at least 10 years, and they won't be my problem anymore. But
Are you thinking that he would also put handrails? I know they don't have as big a vertical drop, so I don't know if you're thinking handrails or not.
probably just for aesthetics,
Uh-huh.
if nothing else. I mean, because I think the first cedar log bridge that we built is one of them I'm talking about. The one going over where the horseshoe is.
Right.
I think that would look really good there. Plus, and it's safer, so it saves us one less thing to worry about. So.
Right. So you'll talk to Jack about giving us quotes for those?
Yeah, as soon as the money's approved.
Okay.
So,
Well, we do have some money in the budget that we thought we were going to spend on the Orange Trail, and we were able to get that done last fiscal year. So we should look at our maintenance budget
Mhm.
and see if we've got some budget in there that we could use, depending on what his cost is. The other thing that Carolyn and I have talked about a couple of times, and maybe we should mention it again, is the stone steps and handrails that this is the Blue Trail between Montero Drive and where the connection from the parking lot.
the first creek crossing.
That creek crossing there, we had stone steps and handrails put in. And with the various floods, those stones have kind of been either washed away or teetering. And I know that Carolyn has expressed concern about it being difficult to cross the stream. And I'm not sure what we can do for that. I think, again, we'd probably have to get someone to come in and, the fact that we have floods makes it difficult to figure out a permanent solution to that.
Yeah, with that area in particular too, you're talking about, it doesn't do it often, but it is a high flow area when we have like torrential rains. So that's where a lot of the problems come in with that. I don't know, maybe we try concreting the stones in and try a little erosion control or something. I don't know.
Yeah, this has been sort of a cause of mine for a long time, sort of a pet peeve that, we don't have a good solution for it. And I would like an expert opinion on what kinds of options there would be, because I don't have any trouble crossing it, but we do have people that walk that trail that are a little more limited, children and older people that maybe don't have such good footing. And I know that when we've done some of the wildflower walks, I've had people on those walks that had trouble with that crossing. So I would just like for us to pursue at least looking at or consulting someone that would be able to provide some sort of options. And maybe there aren't any good options, but I don't think we've ever really delved into that as much as we possibly could. So I'm not sure what the next step would be or who we would consult, but especially with money in the budget or money in the city's coffers that we could possibly tap into, if there were ever time to resolve that issue, it would be now, while there would be possibly some chance of getting some funding, because we've done so much to want to make the trail safe, and yet to me that's the most unsafe part of the Blue Trail.
Well, I may have missed it, but could you tell me what specifically what it is you'd like to get done?
Well, Mayor, on the Blue Trail, the first creek crossing, where there are stone steps that have been put in and handrails, the handrails help, but the stone steps have kind of washed away during flooding. They're still there, but they are all sort of dislodged, and it just makes coming down those steps pretty tricky and going back up them. So I don't know, we were just talking about whether or not there would be another option for, Ron mentioned concreting them in, or looking at some way to make that creek crossing safer. And, some of the problem is that when there are torrential rains, that area gets kind of flooded in there, and
Velocity.
yeah, the sheer velocity of it and the height of the water in there. So, we have discussed this before as a committee, but we really haven't looked into consulting someone that would be able to advise us on what possible options could make that better. But as it is, I just feel like that's one sort of unsafe area that makes it less accessible for some people that would be using that trail.
Is that the sort of thing that Steve Emily could help you with?
I was just wondering that myself.
Why don't you ask him?
Okay.
I wasn't gonna say it myself, but yes.
Hey, Steve, Steve, one idea we
I
kicked
didn't know you
around
were
was,
still there.
Steve, one idea we kicked around was a cable bridge crossing. A cable bridge?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that bridge in a bit, but I'd love to take a look at it.
If you want to come out one day, Steve, when it's good for you, I'll take you down there and show you the area they're talking about. It's right off of the parking lot. So.
Okay, I'll do that.
The other place, and it's not anywhere near the stream crossing of the Blue Trail, but the other place we've talked about coming up with a permanent solution is that area on the Green Trail. Stuart, maybe you can, that you've fixed a couple of times, and we talked about trying to do something to protect the slope and the what do I want to say, the bank. And you put up that landscape fabric that held for a couple of years, but we probably almost need a retaining wall there, and I don't know how we get that done, but maybe that's something else we could have someone look at. So if you're up for a long hike, Steve, we can take you and show you that part too.
Always.
Anything else on the parks? Do we
Just
want
figure out what it is that you want to do and how much it'll cost. And we'll put it in a budget request for the coming year.
Okay. Sally, did you have something?
I think it was Carolyn.
Oh, was it Carol?
Oh, just a quick question for Ron or Linda. I just wanted to ask if the other Bluebird box was ever installed on the Orange Trail that, not the Orange Trail, Putney Pond that Phil Tamplin was going to donate, put up for us.
I think there is one in Putney Pond on that utility pole, Ron, near the pond, near the meadow?
I thought they were all up.
I think it's there.
Okay, yeah, that's one that he hadn't done initially. And
Right.
he said that he would just go ahead and do it with our permission. So I haven't been back there since then, and I just wanted to see if that had been done.
I think it's there.
Great.
So let's talk about our next regular meeting. And I don't know when the next council meeting is. I meant to look, but I don't have a city calendar anymore.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
I think it's the 22nd of February. It's a Tuesday, I think. If somebody wants to back me up, that's what I said.
That's correct.
Said it.
It's Tuesday the 22nd because of, because of President's Day.
President's Day. Okay, because President's Day is on the 21st, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so a week before that, is this right, would be the 14th, Monday the 14th? I guess I don't have my,
That's right.
could we do Monday the 14th at 5 o'clock?
That's Valentine's Day.
Oh,
Yep. You try to get us married men in
are there
trouble.
any romantics in this group? Okay, I would like us to try to meet before the council meeting if we can. Could we do a 2 o'clock on Wednesday again? Does that work for people or not?
That sounds fun.
So we're thinking 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 16th. Will that work for you? What's your name, Ron?
It's nice to be remembered. Yeah, I'm fine with that. If everybody else is, I will go on and schedule it in.
Yeah, let's go ahead and put that on the calendar. And then I'll see if we can, I'll send out an email to figure out dates for a special meeting to discuss the bridge thing. Now, would people like to meet on a Monday at 5 for that? I guess, there's 2 Mondays between now and then, or a couple, actually there's 3, right? The 24th, the 31st, or the 7th? Or do you prefer meeting in the middle of the afternoon?
I mean, I think 5 o'clock is a good time. Just it doesn't break up the day as much. So I can meet anytime, but I think that is a good time.
Those days look fine for me.
They do, the 24th or the 31st?
Sure.
I'm good.
I would prefer the 24th. I've got 2 appointments scheduled on the 31st, so.
Okay,
I
Why
could
don't we-
do the 24th.
okay, so we'll have 1/24. Oh, I better check my calendar. Make sure I can do that.
And Linda, before we go, we wanted to tell you something too.
Sure. Oh, you mean,
Well, at the end of the meeting, we just wanted
Oh.
to tell you something. So.
okay. All right, let's go for the 24th at 5 o'clock. Okay. Is there any other business?
Maybe this is,
ahead.
maybe
Sorry?
this is Steve.
Yes.
Would the city like for me to attend that next meeting?
Sure.
Completely up to you.
Would that be good for everyone?
Fine. I mean, it's about the bridge, so.
Yeah.
Ron, if you would just email me when you've got the hard copy at City Hall, I'll come by and pick it up.
It'll be ready tomorrow morning, so.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other business?
I don't know if it's considered business, but the committee and the city of Prospect are donating 2 trees in the honor of your loved ones, Linda, that you lost last year.
Oh, my.
So we just got everything put together, but I'll be consulting with you as to what you want to have on the plaques in memory of your mom and your mother-in-law.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet. Thank you very much. Hey, if there's no other business, I guess we are adjourned. Thank you all.
See everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
See
Take
you all.
care,
Thank you,
folks.
Steve.
Hi, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.